Bonjour la classe. Aujourd'hui, nous travaillons avec le passé composé et l'imparfait. Commençons avec une petite histoire. C'était une nuit sombre et orageuse. Le vent hurlait dans les arbres. J'étais toute seule dans la maison. Tout d'un coup, il y a eu un frappement à la porte. Tout en tremblant, j'ai ouvert la porte et un corbeau est entré dans la maison. So here's the translation. So let's look at the verbs in here. So we have the first three sentences. We have one type of verb. C'était une nuit sombre et orageuse. Le vent hurlait. And j'étais. So which kind of verb is that? It's the imparfait. Tout d'un coup, il y a eu, j'ai ouvert, et un corbeau est entré. What form of the verb are these three verbs? That's right, they're the passé composé. So, this entire passage is in the past tense, but we have two forms of the past tense that we're seeing here. We have our past perfect or our past participle, le passé composé, and we have our imperfect, our imparfait. Today we're going to be talking more about when you use the imparfait and when you use the passé composé. Let's get started. First of all, let's review how you form the passé composé and the imparfait. So the passé composé is a composite verb. So there's a helping verb, which is going to be either être or avoir, and it's going to be followed by a past participle. The imparfait, on the other hand, is a simple tense. So there's only just the one verb. So here's an example of the passé composé. So your past helping verb is going to be either avoir or être. And then you're going to have the past participle. So look at recevoir, j'ai reçu, tu as reçu, on a reçu, nous avons reçu, vous avez reçu, elles ont reçu. So you notice we're conjugating the helping verb. The helping verb changes according to who's doing the thing. J'ai, tu as, on a, nous avons, vous avez, ils ou elles ont. And then your past participle is going to stay the same. It's reçu, 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 reçu. J'ai reçu, tu as reçu, on a reçu, nous avons reçu, vous avez reçu, et ils ou elles ont reçu. And let's look at the passé composé with être. It's going to be the same thing. You're going to conjugate être, je suis, tu es, on est, nous sommes, vous êtes, elles sont, ou ils sont. And you are going to follow it with a past participle. And you notice I have little e's here and s's here. And does anybody remember why that is? So in the passé composé with être, you're going to make the past participle agree with the subject. So let's look at tu es allé. If I'm talking to a woman, I'll have this extra E. But if I'm talking to a man, I won't. Voilà le passé composé. Now let's talk about how you form the imparfait. So to form the imparfait, you first find your stem. So you're going to take the nous form of the verb. So for recevoir, the nous form would be nous recevons. You're going to drop the ONS, and what's left is your stem. So for recevoir, it'll be R-E-C-E-V. So now you have your stem, it's time to add your endings. AIS, AIS, AIT, IONS, IEZ, AIENT. Je recevais, tu recevais, on recevait, nous recevions, vous receviez, elle recevait. Voilà la formation de l'imparfait. So now we've reviewed the form for each verb. When do we use each one? So generally, the passé composé refers to a specific instance of an action. So there was this one time I did something, or there were a specific number of times that I did something. The imparfait, on the other hand, is used to talk about repeated or habitual actions, ongoing actions, so things that were happening when another action interrupted them, and for descriptions and background information. So the way I like to remember all of this is the imparfait answers the questions, what were things like? And the passé composé answers the question, what changed? So if you're describing what things were like, you would use the imparfait. And if you're talking about something that changed, you would use the passé composé. And your book has a very helpful tool to help you with distinguishing when to use the imparfait or the passé composé. There are specific expressions that are typically associated with each type of verb. So with the imparfait, so repeated or habitual actions or interrupted actions or background information, you have autrefois, formerly, d'habitude, de temps en temps, le lundi. And remember, when you have the direct object before a day of the week, it means every Monday. So le lundi is every Monday, le mardi is every Tuesday, le weekend, so every weekend, and pendant que. So pendant que je lisais, that's a background action, while I was reading. Pendant que je lisais. Here are some phrases that you normally associate with the passé composé. Au moment où, lundi. So here we don't have an article. So we're talking about this Monday. Lundi. Mardi. This Tuesday. Lundi, mardi. Voilà. Plusieurs fois. So several times. So this happened more than once, but it's a specific number of times. Plusieurs fois. Soudain. Suddenly. Tout à coup. Suddenly. Un jour. Un week-end. Une fois ou deux fois. So a specific number of times. So let's look at some examples. D'habitude, nous étudions à la bibliothèque. So d'habitude means normally. D'habitude, nous étudions à la bibliothèque. Normally, we would study at the library. Quand j'étais jeune, nous allions à la plage le week-end. So le week-end here means every weekend. So when I was young, we would go to the beach every weekend. Or we used to go to the beach every weekend. Now let's look at the passé composé. Un jour, One day, nous avons étudié au café. So, d'habitude, nous étudions à la bibliothèque. Un jour, nous avons étudié au café. One day, we went to a cafe. This was something different. This is something that changed. This is a habitual action. D'habitude, nous étudions à la bibliothèque. And this is something that changed. Un jour, nous avons étudié au café. And let's look at the second example. Un week-end, nous sommes allés à la montagne. So here you have le week-end, which is every weekend. So we're talking about a habitual action. Quand j'étais jeune, nous allions à la plage le week-end. Un week-end, nous sommes allés à la montagne. One weekend, we went to the mountain. Voila. Now that we've talked a little bit about when to use the imparfait and when to use the passé composé, it's time to start practicing. Pratiquons. Regardons une petite histoire. L'histoire de la bûche de Noël. Voilà une bûche. Voilà une bûche. Regardons ce passage. Tous les verbes sont à l'infinitif. So all the verbs are in the infinitive form. This is a story in the past tense. So you're going to want to conjugate each verb in the past tense. And you're going to use either the passé composé or the imparfait, depending on what makes sense. Let's look at the first one. Prendre. Comptons cette photo. So when this picture was taken. So what are you feeling? Imparfait or passé composé? It's going to be passé composé. Quand on a pris cette photo. So how do we know that it's passé composé? Because this is an action that took place in a split second. It's not something that was going on while something else happened. It wasn't a habitual action. This was something, we did it and it was done. Quand on a pris cette photo. Prenez une minute et regardons le reste du passage et trouvez la bonne forme des verbes. So take a minute to look at the rest of the passage and identify the right form of the verb and conjugate it. Voila. Go ahead and pause the video. Voila. I'm assuming that you're unpausing now. Quand on a pris cette photo, and here we have avoir. Avoir. Now, avoir is almost always in the imparfait. Not always, but almost. If you were to say, use avoir in the passé composé, j'ai eu, that would mean I got. So here we say, I'm saying j'avais 21 ans. If I were to say j'ai eu 21 ans, that would mean I turned 21. But here I'm just saying that I was 21. So j'avais 21 ans. So again, this is background information. It's not something that changed during this narration. So let's look at être. Étudiante à Centenary College. Again, imparfait. J'étais étudiante à Centenary College. So why is this imparfait? So I'm describing the situation here. I'm not talking about something that happened. If I were to say j'ai été étudiante, that would mean I became a student. But I'm just saying I was a student. This is background information. This is sort of setting up the context for this photo. So, context. J'étais étudiante à Centenary College. So, être and avoir in the past tense will usually be in the imperfect, unless you're trying to talk about something changing. But usually imperfect. J'avais 21 ans. J'étais étudiante à Centenary College. So here we have être again. Être Noël. And this is going to be imperfect too, for the same reason. C'était Noël. We're talking more about context. It was Christmas. Et rendre visite chez ma famille à Ruston, en Louisiane. This one's a little trickier, but it is imparfait because I'm not saying that, oh, and then I went to visit my parents. I'm still giving background information about what the situation was when we took this photo. Je rendais visite chez ma famille à Ruston, en Louisiane. Donc, voilà moi, voilà mon frère, voilà mon ami Ashley, voilà ma mère, et voilà mon ami Nicole. And yes, Ashley always looks this good in pictures, and yes, Nicole always looks this happy. Comme c'était Noël, here we have décidé de faire une bûche de Noël avec mes amis. So is décidé going to be imparfait or passé composé? Are we describing the situation or talking about habitual action? Or is this something that's going to move the narration forward? It's going to be passé composé. This is moving the story forward. This is a decisive action. J'ai décidé de faire une bûche de Noël avec mes amis. And here we have inviter and travailler. So are we giving context or are we moving the story forward? We're moving the story forward. So inviter. Je les ai invités chez moi. And you notice I have an S because there's a preceding direct object. And the past participle has to agree with the preceding direct object because French. Et travailler. So again, we're moving the narration forward. So it's going to be passé composé. Nous avons travaillé ensemble. Mon ami Joel a pris cette photo. You can't trust Joel. He takes pictures at the worst times. Okay, voilà. Et voici la bûche de Noël que nous, le verbe c'est faire ensemble. So is this going to be imparfait or passé composé? Are we talking about something habitual? Are we talking about background information? Or are we talking about a decisive action? We're talking about a decisive action. This is the bûche de Noël that we made together. Nous avons fait ensemble. And look, there's a direct object, la bûche de Noël. And the direct object is before the verb. So we have to make it agree. La bûche de Noël que nous avons faite ensemble. Voilà l'histoire de la bûche de Noël. Regardons maintenant notre travail Canvas pour aujourd'hui. Nous avons cette activité un dimanche, pas comme les autres. Votre voisin, Marc Dufour, était une personne routinière. Une personne routinière. So, if you had to guess what routinière meant, what would it mean? Yeah, it's somebody who follows habits. Il était une personne routinière. Mais un dimanche, one Sunday, il a changé ses habitudes. He changed his habits. Voici son histoire. So, regardons le modèle. Le dimanche matin. So, are we talking about this specific Sunday or are we talking about every Sunday? It's going to be every Sunday. Le dimanche matin, every Sunday morning. That's what that definite article before the name of the day of the week means. It was every Sunday. Le dimanche matin. Dormir en général jusqu'à 8 heures. So we have the expression en général and the expression le dimanche matin. So this is every Sunday and it's en général, usually, generally. So is this going to be imparfait or passé composé? It's going to be imparfait. Le dimanche matin, il dormait en général jusqu'à 8 heures. So what did we have to add to make this a logical sentence? We have just fragments of the sentence here. What did we have to change to make it a logical sentence? We had to add the subject, il, and we had to conjugate the verb. So, le dimanche matin, il dormait en général jusqu'à 8 heures. Let's look at the second half. Mais ce dimanche-là, so he's talking about this specific Sunday. Ce dimanche-là, dormir jusqu'à midi. So once again, we have the infinitive. We're going to need to conjugate it. And which tense are we going to use if we're talking about what happened this specific Sunday? If it's this specific Sunday, it's not a habitual action. So we're going to use the passé composé. Mais ce dimanche-là, il a dormi jusqu'à midi. Mais ce dimanche-là, il a dormi jusqu'à midi. Le dimanche matin, il dormait en général jusqu'à 8 heures. Mais ce dimanche-là, il a dormi jusqu'à midi. So, what you're going to do for your class Canvas is you're going to write out the answers to all 4 of these questions. And I'm going to make it so that you have to submit a Word file or an image of something that you wrote out by hand, just because it'll be easier to grade for me than the text box, and I'll be able to give you more detailed feedback. Voilà. Bonne journée à tous. Je reste à votre disposition pour toutes vos questions. I'm at your disposal for all questions. Et voilà, bonne journée.